Good morning. So finally, our learning objective today is to write our non-narrative reports. So we're going to write our newspaper reports today. You're going to use alliteration, you're going to use newspaper features, and you're going to use emotive language. But before we do that, let's hear the next part of the story.
Battle weary. The hero and his thane slept deeply until the black raven in the tree outside raucously greeted the coming of the new day. Sunlight chased away the shadows as the prince and his companions made ready to leave. Now the fight was done. They wanted to be home, every warrior among them. They had been away long enough. Before he left, Beowulf returned trunting to Unferth, the king's herald, and thanked him for the loan of it, without ever finding fault with the blade that had failed him. Beowulf was like this, fierce in battle, but generous and thoughtful in spirit. He did not want to hurt Unferth's feelings. Now, dressed in their armour and prepared for the journey home, Beowulf and his warriors went to Hrothgar to say their last farewells. The Geatish hero spoke first. "You will understand, great Hrothgar, how we long to return to Hygelac, to see once again our home and hearth. You have looked after us royally. We shall not forget your kindness. Know also, Lord Hrothgar, that I shall always be ready to come to your aid again, if you should ever need me. If I hear you are threatened by your neighbours, or that any intend you harm, I shall come back with 1,000 warriors to help you. Hygelac, my young king, lord of the Geats would, I know, always want me to be at your side, shoulder to shoulder, and defending you against your enemies, along with a forest of sharpened Geatish spears, if ever you should need us." Saddened at this parting, Hrothgar, wise in his great age, spoke to Beowulf, knowing that it was unlikely he would ever set eyes on his dear friend again. Tears filled his eyes as he embraced the Geatish hero for the last time. He spoke to him as a father to his favourite son. "I have never known a man at the same time so young and so wise. In you strength and wisdom are perfectly matched. How the Lord in heaven has blessed you. If any ask me, I shall say this. Should, God forbid, the Geats lose their renowned king through sword or sickness, they could not want for a better prince than you to take his place and rule over the kingdom. In coming here to help us, you have brought our two peoples close together. By your courage, you have banished any lingering ancient rivalries between Dane and Geat. So long as I am king, our ships will cross the seas between us, filled not with spears, but only with gifts of friendship and love. We shall, from now on, stand always fast together, sea Geats and spear Danes, firm against our enemies." So Beowulf left, carrying with him 12 new treasures, those promised parting gifts from the king to the Geatish hero, that dear man, friend forever of the Danish king and his people. Gold decked and resplendent with rings he left them, and not a Dane who watched him go believed the reward was any more than he deserved. Now they came again to the seashore, sorrowing in their loss of Handscio, their dead war companion, and at the same time rejoicing in all that had been achieved, and also in Hrothgar's generosity towards them. The coastguard, who had greeted them days before, saw them coming again, these young warrior heroes in their war shirts and glittering helmets. He rode to greet them, guiding them to the waiting seaboat he had guarded so carefully for them. Once the ship was loaded with horses and armour and Hrothgar's hoard of gifts, Beowulf gave the coastguard a gift, a gold-hilted sword. It was a gift I am sure the man treasured forever. Then a mist rose high over the deck. The slack sail hoisted, and was soon wind-filled and taut, and the ship's timbers felt again the sea surge. Out over the waves the ship danced, rejoicing to feel again the foam at its throat. Like the warriors, That sea boat longed to be home, rode the ocean, surf skimmed the waves until they saw at last the welcome cliffs and headlands of home, a coast they knew and loved. A favourable breeze brought them over the shallows and beached them safely on shore. Their coming had not gone unnoticed on those homeland cliffs. Geatish coastguards had long been watching for their return, anxiously awaiting their beloved heroes. They were there on the beach, helping to moor the boat, to hold it fast so that no sea surge could harm this boat of heroes. They were there to help unload the heroes' golden hoard, marvelling at the amount of it, at the richness of it. They did not have far to carry it, for Hygelac, the Geatish king, lived with his warband close by the sea wall itself. News of their coming, of the hoard they carried, raced ahead of them to Hygelac himself, brave king of all the Geats. Beowulf, his nephew and greatest champion, his hearth companion, had survived his perilous quest and was returning home unscathed. By order of Hygelac, the mead hall was cleared at once and prepared for Beowulf and those honoured Geatish heroes. As he saw Beowulf and his warriors striding into the hall, Hygelac could scarcely contain his burning curiosity to hear all about their adventures in Denmark and their miraculous return. After all the greetings were done, there never was such a warmth of welcome, and the mead cup had been offered around to each and every one of these heroes. The two noble kinsmen, Hygelac and Beowulf, sat down face to face, the one eager to know, the other eager to tell. Hygelac leaned forward, longing to hear. "Tell us now, brave Beowulf, how you survived this battle in distant Heorot. I warned you, did I not, of the dangers that lay ahead of you in Denmark? 'Do not go, dear friend,' I said, 'and face that murderous monster Grendel.' Those were my very words, if I remember. Yet you did not listen to my advice. You were determined to help Hrothgar, a friend in need, and I confess now how much I admired you for it. Tell me now all that happened. Live it for us again, so that we may know all you have done whilst you were gone." So Beowulf told his story to the king, of how the Geats had been so royally welcomed to Heorot, that great mead hall, of Grendel's coming by night, how Handscio had been snatched up half asleep and ground to death in Grendel's jaws. "I grappled with this beast barehanded, my lord Hygelac," said Beowulf, "grasped his arm and would not let go. When he tore himself away, I still held his severed arm. Perhaps he thought he had escaped, but it was his death wound, his life's blood draining out of him deep in his watery lair. So that monster died, and I avenged all the hurt he had done to Hrothgar and the Danes. And generously, that king rewarded me, just as he had promised, with a treasure hoard of gold, rich and finely worked. And at Heorot, all of us, Danish thanes and Geatish warriors, rejoiced. But we rejoiced too soon. For out of the night came Grendel's vengeful mother, a fiend filled with fury. She struck down the first she saw, Aesir he was called, most beloved counsellor and dearest hearth companion to Hrothgar, the old king. So I went after her. Seeking her lair, I plunged into the whirlpool of sea serpents and found her there, this gruesome guardian of the deep. Hand to hand we fought. I was near to death, then as I have ever been, saved only by God and a giant sword. With this I hewed off both their hideous heads, made an end to that family of monsters, slew the last of Satan's children, and brought peace again to Hrothgar and the Danish people. For all this, the fair and generous king presented us with more treasure still, all of which, brave king, I have carried back for you, who are my only family." Then Beowulf had them bring in all the treasures he had received from Hrothgar, a boar's head standard, helmet and war shirt and sword, all of which had belonged to Hrothgar's own brother. No gift could have been more generous than all this garb of war, none more kindly meant. 4 high-stepping horses were then led in. Burnished bay they were, and matching as apples. All these and more Beowulf gave that day to his lord. Surely there was never a more generous heart than his. To Hygelac's queen he presented the marvellous ancient collar he had been given by Hrothgar, 3 prancing horses also, and fine saddles too. Wearing this jewel, the queen shone in beauty as never before. All these great gifts, and to honour this great champion, Hygelac laid in Beowulf's lap the finest sword in the royal treasure, Richly wrought in gold it was, magnificent in every detail. But that was not all. The king bestowed on him there and then a huge estate and fine hall too, fit for such a hero who had brought through his brave deeds such honour and such riches to the land of the Geats. All seemed then peaceful and set fair for Hygelac and the Geats, but the fate of kings and their people, even of great heroes, is forever fickle and fraught with danger.
So, have a think. What are we writing about today? We're going to be writing about the battle between Beowulf and Grendel, reporting it as if we are newspaper reporters who have gone to the scene, interviewed eyewitnesses, found out what happened, and are reporting that to the wider people of Denmark. So, tell me 5 things that happened in the battle. You can just think about them, or you can pause the video and make a note in your books. These are the 5 things that I came up with. If you want, when you're writing your report, you could go back to this slide to help you remember what happens. Firstly, Grendel ripped open the iron doors. Then, Grendel ate Handscio. Then, Beowulf grabbed Grendel's arm and they wrestled and fought through the night. Then, Beowulf ripped off Grendel's arm, and finally, Grendel staggered off to die. Have a look back in your book at the planning that you've done so far. Can you find 2 examples of alliteration that you're going to use? Can you find 2 exciting adjectives you're going to use? If you can't, have a think now. What are you going to put in your story? So this is my example of a newspaper report. If you can see, I've not used the full sort of features of a newspaper. I've not done the masthead and the price and all that, because mainly I'm focusing on the report itself. Let's have a look at the different features I've got. So in my headline, I've used alliteration. Although Beowulf doesn't begin with a D, all these other words do. Death-defying Beowulf defeats demon. And then my subheading, or could even be like a very short stand first, I guess. Geatish greats heroic. No, that's not right, is it? Geatish greats Herot heroics. So weirdly, these are 2 G's, but we pronounce that with a Y, so that doesn't quite work as alliteration, but it looks good. And Herot heroics certainly does. By Tor Svensson. So I made myself up a Danish name. This sentence here tells us everything that the story is about. Last night, the courageous and powerful Geatish hero Beowulf finally rid the kingdom of Denmark of the vicious monster Grendel. I've used these adjectives, courageous and powerful, vicious, so that people who are reading it know just what we're talking about. I'll come back to these subheadings in a moment. Around 9 o'clock yesterday night, the brave band of Geats lay sleeping. Gruesome Grendel burst through the solid iron doors of Herot and began his rotten rampage. Sadly, Handscio, 24, was immediately eaten, but the foul fiend was not so fortunate with his next victim. So I've used quite a bit of alliteration in there. I've got the brave band, gruesome Grendel, rotten rampage, foul fiend, fortunate, and actually immediately eaten have a similar sound at the beginning, even though it's not the same letter. Then I move on to some of the quotes. Remember your quotes from the other day and use them. You don't need to make up new ones if you've already got good ones from earlier on in the week. He made the mistake of going for Beowulf, said Olaf, 32, an eyewitness who was in the hall. Beowulf, 29, grabbed the cruel creature's arm and would not let go. Through the night the pair battled on. So I've got cruel creature there as well, and I've got my quotes using my inverted commas, my exclamation mark, and so on. Even the ground was shaking, said Lagatha 22, who was listening outside. It were like the world were coming to an end. Now here, some of you might have noticed, I've used were when I should have used was. But that's because it's a quote, and perhaps, when we're speaking, like I've talked about in class a lot, we might not use the right was or were. We might get them the wrong way around, but that's fine if we're talking about a quote and what somebody actually said. It helps us understand how that person would have sounded. In the end, though the magnificent man... Oh, sorry, I'll start again. In the end, though, the magnificent man from the land of the Geats was too much for the exhausted enemy. By ripping Grendel's arm clean off, brave Beowulf sealed the monster's fate, and he slunk off into the night to die. So I've got magnificent man, exhausted enemy. So I'm still using that alliteration, and these are some good adjectives. Magnificent, exhausted. Slunk is a good verb as well. So you can see I've tried to use lots of the features we've talked about. The last thing, which is a curious thing with newspapers, is these subheadings. What you'll often find in a newspaper is the subheadings are just a word from the following paragraph. So here I've chosen rampage. Here I've chosen grabbed, which is here. And here I've chosen magnificent man, which is here. I'm not sure why they do that in newspapers, but if you do it in your report, it makes it look more like an actual newspaper report. So now's the time for you to write your own newspaper reports. Think about all the features that we've looked at this week. Look back at all the planning you've done and write me a report. I've included some pictures here to help you understand or to help you see in your mind what the scene would have been like. Down the bottom we've got perhaps what the hall would have looked like at the start of the night. Here is the scene afterwards with all the destruction. Things toppled over, things smashed up. And then here's a picture of Beowulf twisting and ripping at Grendel's arm. So write your reports, think about all those features, and when you've done that, that's the end of our English for the week.